Welcome to Eternal Paradigm. Together, we're uncovering the human experience and exploring physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual stories with me, your host, Amy Ravel. Welcome to Eternal Paradigm. I hope you're enjoying your journey to find you. This episode for me is quite an exciting one because I get to follow up. So for those of you who have been listening frequently, the Do We Really Know Ourselves episode, which is a snapshot of my personal journey really. This is a follow-up from that to some extent. And many of you who have heard that episode have been in touch with me, and I am so grateful that you've felt able to connect with me and actually share that you've been able to relate to some of the things that I actually talk about in that episode. Now, I think the fact that I call it a snapshot is telling in that that's just one small snapshot of several mental health challenges and bouts of depression that I have had pretty much throughout a majority of my life. I'm able now to share the reality of my journey and also to explain the tips and tricks and also to share with you some of the things that I've learned on my way. Some may be relevant to you and some may not. So in this episode, I am joined by my life coach. Again, I don't expect everybody to know what a life coach is or what they do, and that's absolutely okay. Simon Rogers, the Feel Well coach, has been working with me for the last 6 to 7 months, and it's no secret, again, for those of you who are in the know, that I have frequently had different types of counselling over the course of my life. Not all of it has helped. It hasn't really made sense. It didn't hit home, and that's not to say that it hasn't worked for others. It has, beautifully. That person wasn't me. I felt that the counselling that I was getting wasn't enough. It wasn't telling me to dig deep. It wasn't telling me to come back to me. It was still telling me to stay on the outside. That's something that didn't sit right. So when I decided to move on and move forward, and when I realised that ultimately my soul was calling me, my soul was talking to me, and again I say these things out loud, and I know that many who are listening or many who will come to hear this are probably going to roll their eyes or respond in some way of whatever. That's entirely up to you. So when I came to decide that I needed help, but I didn't need counselling, I didn't need medication, I didn't need to speak to a doctor, I needed help in a totally different way. And I reached out. Simon, whose expertise, I guess, comes from understanding the physical manifestations of unresolved issues and unresolved challenges, or even unresolved trauma that people have been through in life, and how this then moves on to manifest in a physical way, and that is what he specializes in. And within the context of that, he works with you to bring out the best in you. For those of you who have read the Ultimate Life Coach's recent best-selling book, Think Like a Monk, Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk, Simon is the silent monk. Your strength lies in your knowledge of yourself and your own mind. I won't read out the rest of it. I do suggest, if you haven't read it, that you definitely try and read Jay Shetty's book. So just to add a little bit more flavour to this really, I'm asking Simon lots of questions, things that I wouldn't really probably get to ask him when we're having our sessions, although I think it's also pretty fair to say that I do WhatsApp him a lot. He's been very inspirational for me in helping me understand me better, and he comes from a place of absolute non-judgment, and that in itself has just spoken so much to me. So I would like to introduce Simon Rogers.
I'm Simon Rogers. I'm the Feel Good coach, and essentially I own Restore Your Body Now, and I help people solve their challenges for good. So typically they might have upper back pain or neck pain, but equally they might have stress-related challenges. So I help them solve it for good so that they feel better, they sleep better, and they fall back in love with their lives again.
Thank you, Simon. So I have a question for you. What is a coach?
Well, I wouldn't actually describe myself as a coach, but I would say that coaching is a really important skill set, and it's probably really being able to hold a space for people. Now, I know that's a bit of jargon, holding space, but I suppose what I mean by that is we all have ideas of how we think life works, who we think we are, who we think other people are, and what they think and how they should live their lives. But they're all kind of in our own heads, right? And it's not necessarily how life actually is, right? Life just is. So when we can hold a space, so literally be there with no judgment, no idea of how things should be, but are willing to explore with a curiosity of the way things are, well, actually, that allows a transformation to happen because often we don't gift ourselves that space to do that. So when somebody can help you, guide you to do that, then you move in a totally different direction than you had been before, which is often leading to a certain challenge, a certain symptom, or, back pain, or is it feeling overwhelmed, or is it feeling depressed or sad, or whatever it is, whatever that particular challenge is.
So, would you say sometimes, in your experience of working with people, that sometimes physical symptoms are manifestations of unresolved issues or types of trauma potentially, or just almost like a bodily reaction to aspects that need closer attention?
Yeah, in a word, yes. But we also need to be aware of the conditioning of how we approach health and how we often see the symptoms that we're experiencing as being the problem. So what I mean by that is you might have a pain or you might have the symptom of anxiety, or often we'll go like, oh my goodness, that pain is so annoying. It's in the way of me being able to run or to pick up my child or being able to focus on my job or my work. And it's my excuse for me not to actualize my potential and do what I want to do. So it's a problem. It's in the way. It needs to go. And we start trying to reduce that symptom, and everything that we try and do is geared towards solving that. And it's not just us, but the whole of the healthcare system is kind of set up in that way that we do everything to numb, reduce, nullify the symptoms. But actually, the problem leading to the symptom doesn't necessarily have to be in the same location as the symptoms. And I found that by studying the body in minute detail for over a decade, and it often isn't. And so the problem itself is often somewhere else, somewhere different, somewhere that you need to tune into your body to notice it, because it's more subtle than the symptom. And when you do that, which is a process that I help my clients do, you can actually start to unravel that and understand what the causes are. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, and yes, but that's because I'm already on this side. So I think you've definitely kind of hit the nail on the head in the way that we approach and understand health, where we spend all of our time trying to fix a problem rather than understanding the actual root.
Mm.
So yes, definitely that does. But how did you get to this point? Because you've kind of started talking initially and saying that you've studied the human body
Mm.
itself, but the Feel Well coach even is a very kind of holistic approach. So it's like mind, body, soul, environment, everything.
Yeah.
So where did you start to get to this point now? If you can sum it up in a few words.
I do my best, but you know me, I can talk. Well, I've always had the feeling, that there's not this separateness, and the separateness is a conditioned approach that we look at life. We've often spoken about this, but if we think about a person and we say we look at somebody holistically, then we'll say, for example, their physical, mental, and emotional being, but we still describe them as separate entities and not as this interconnected isness or being. So there's still the separateness. And the analogy that we spoke about recently was like a tree. Imagine a tree. And often if you imagine a tree, you imagine it with, the trunk, the roots, the leaves, and this big white space around it. So it's got this outline around it. But where in nature do you find a tree with a definite outline around it? Never, right? it's interconnected. If you examine it closely, you'll see that you see the air coming through it, the lights moving through it. So where does that start and end? And if you go down to the roots and where they go into the soil, they become part of the soil. Where does it start and where does it end? The only part it starts and ends is in our definitions, in our labels, and when we create a mental construct of things. So for me, it's always been a case of I've been challenged through my life to re-examine the conditioned approach of really left brain thinking, of breaking things down, because you can learn a lot through breaking things down, but you miss the bigger picture, you miss life itself, the interconnectedness. And that is something that is not thinking, it's feeling. It's a deep feeling of, and it's not something that necessarily is very natural to us as adults. It's often conditioned out of us as we start to adapt to the needs of society. So we need to kind of go back to exploring that, but now consciously, that we did have that status as children. We don't necessarily think about everything when we were children. There's a big feeling aspect of that, but we kind of lose sight of that, lose feeling of that. So that's been a big part of my journey. There's lots of things along the way, of course.
Of course,
Yeah.
it's never plain sailing. It's not supposed to be, though.
No, definitely not.
So, can you give us some ideas of the type of things that you would kind of work with a client? And I'm obviously happy to be the guinea pig here and kind of fill in some of the things that we've done. But it would be good to kind of get a broader idea of all of the different things you can do, because even though I know I'm a special case and a lot of the stuff applies, what would be your kind of, how, would you be able to sum it up to say, anything from working with someone? Yeah, no, how could you sum it up? That's what, because I can give kind of lots of ideas and explain the type of work that we've done together. So
Yeah.
it could be a combination of, just through tools and techniques, getting myself to refocus through grounding.
Mm-hmm.
And also things like, I think we're going to come to this in a little while, but the other thing is just checking in with yourself and also hanging out with yourself. And they sound like really crazy, interesting, weird things to say. But actually, when you start doing them and you start practicing them, you kind of realize you're okay to hang out with.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? And that, when I actually do tell people that I can't speak to them, or I'm going to be out of touch for a certain amount of time because I'm just checking in with myself, or I'm hanging out with myself, the response I get is, okay, cool, you do that. So it would be good to kind of understand the different tools that you could potentially use with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the how. So I'm very happy to kind of flesh out those different terms so that people don't think we're both a little bit crazy, which we probably kind of are. But anyway, in terms of the solutions.
Yes, absolutely.
Happy to own up to that one. But in terms of the challenges people come to me with and the solutions they get, is essentially it's any kind of health challenges, but typically it's people that are struggling with upper back pain and neck pain that they've had for maybe a year or more. They maybe gone to other places to try and help them solve it, but they've never really got to the root cause and never been able to solve it for good. And they may be juggling this with the stresses of everyday life that's sometimes leading to them feeling overwhelmed. So what I do is I help them solve it for good, so that they feel better, they sleep better, and they feel back in control of their lives again and in love with their lives again. In fact, even during this crazy time, that's even possible. In fact, it actually makes it a little bit more, it makes it easier in some ways, because there's so much changing, so much going on, but we can talk about that later. So the how, obviously, you mentioned some of the little things that you've learned along the way, Amy, and how they've helped you, like hanging out and tuning in. Well, these really depict, they're phrases that are used to point to the experience of going inside. So bring your awareness inside to the internal experience that is you. And that might seem strange, but that's not what we often do. We often have our awareness, our point of focus really on our outside world and everything that's happening around us through the senses of what we can see, what we can taste, what we can touch, what we can hear, and then use those as references to who we are, but who we are is an internal experience. You can only get real insights from inside. It's not necessarily a helpful way to have that externally referenced. If you can hang out, we be willing to explore who you are through just being there, you might be surprised. And it's actually very liberating, very freeing than it typically is if you're getting external validation for who you are. Does that, obviously that makes sense to you, Umi, but is there anything you'd like to add to that in
So
your experience?
conditioning,
Yeah.
yes, conditioning is one of them. And the labeling thing, the having to have a label for everything.
Right. Yeah.
And almost like the whole process for me has been a deconstructing process, like you said, but not in a, I kind of imagine this like breaking, when you break a vase, it kind of shatters into a million pieces. But actually, what I've enjoyed is breaking the vase and letting it shatter into a million pieces, because I've been able to pick up every single one of those pieces, which is an aspect of me, and inspect it and not necessarily learn from it or kind of cast judgment on it, but literally pick it up and inspect it and take it for what it is, or let it go for what it's not. And that's been my process, which I think, like you said, has been quite liberating. And it's helped me in so many different ways, because I have had to stop a lot of my negative internal dialogue, which is so frequent for so many of us.
Yeah, what were the kind of specific situations that you had, the specific challenges that were really painful for you? Because, a lot of people really appreciate if they can identify exactly what's the biggest challenge for them through other people sometimes. Would you be willing to share some of your challenges?
So I came to realize that I just wasn't good enough for myself. I wasn't living up to any of my expectations, which had largely been conditioned into me from a very young age. And that affected every single part of me, from how I had understood previous life experiences, how I then ended up reflecting those around me. So in my existing relationships, because I wasn't good enough for me, I wasn't good enough for anyone. And the breakdown within myself and the impact of that thinking, believing, both physically and mentally, was horrible. It was a very, very, I don't want to say, it was a very heavy, dense, difficult time. I mean, that was when I got to a point where I actually could no longer cope. I could not be that way anymore. And what had happened is almost like my every fiber was telling this story of, you are not good at this, you are not capable of this, you are not enough at this, and it was this dialogue that was running through my head that was so consistent, and that filtered down into every part of my body, thinking and believing that. So even when it came to relationships with my children, relationships with family, my relationship with my husband, even in the context of work, I was not good enough. And at that time, when that was happening, in the thick of it, I want to say, it was so difficult for me to actually sit up like I am able to now and say, that is where it all stemmed from. And I can tell you, through the work that we've done together, I can now go back and pinpoint key things that had happened in key stages of my life that helped me then develop this narrative, this dialogue, this story that I had told myself and made myself believe. And then every single person who then came in my life was going to play out a part in this story that I was writing, I was creating, I was telling. And it was perpetuated by some events that were out of my control. But at that point, I didn't have the tools or the ability to be able to play out the narratives of those situations in any other different way. Yeah. And so that resulted in so many different things for me. There was a lot of pressure in personal relationships, a lot of, begin to take things that other people are saying so personally that you literally start to break, because it almost becomes that the negative words you've been telling yourself for so long, when you start hearing them on the outside as well, yes, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but when there's some part of you inside that knows that that's not true, which ultimately to me, I believe is like my soul was telling me something different. And then it was this, everyone around me was telling me what I believed about myself was true. Therefore, I couldn't at any point get up and say anything. And I couldn't even get the people around me to stick up for me. So
Yes.
I couldn't validate myself. And then I was turning to other people to validate me, which is the most ridiculous thing to do. But that's what we do. That's what our conditioning and our cultured exposure tells
Yeah.
us, that, you know, your validation comes from being a good mother, and you must be all of these things. You know, your validation comes from being a woman, or, you know, virtue and worthiness, and your validation comes from being you know, a woman of a specific culture, of a specific background, of doing things in certain ways. And then that gets compounded and kind of flared up, I guess, with so many cultural connotations, and then it's all attached to words. And that was my story.
Yeah, and it's beautifully worded, and it's just, I think the key that, if I listen to you correctly, is it's really about conscious awareness.
Yes.
So the thing that broke all that pattern is you being aware from a deeper level than the thoughts or the emotions that were being triggered in your life experiences, or through your life experiences. To break that loop, you had to be aware that you are not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're not your beliefs, but you're the awareness of them. And that's, if you can describe it as being the soul level of you, the deeper aspect of you, which is not easy to notice from that level, right? It requires a real quietening down of the outside world, and for you to tune into what is going on inside of you. What is the experience of you? And that's where the focus has to then be, which is quite hard for people in general, but particularly if you're somebody who's very sensitive to other people. Right,
Yes.
and what's going on for
Sorry.
them, and yeah, I thought you might laugh at that bit, but it is extra challenging, because we go, no, well, I will be okay, and what's generally fulfilling for me is when everybody else is happy, and
Yes.
and
And
so,
that's a condition thing as well, right?
right, yeah, there's a layer to that, isn't there?
Yes.
Because imagine this, if we kind of blow that up and make it maybe a bit ridiculous, but this is the way sometimes it's useful to see it when it's blown up, is if you imagine you going, okay, everybody is around me, everybody I care about, you all need to be okay. You need to not have the challenges that you have. You need to have them all dealt with so that I can finally be at peace, please. Because that's the only way it works for me. I need you all to be happy and to be content, in my vision of how that is as well. So you can't have your own perspective of life, and
Wow,
life
that's
needs to be
control freak.
exactly, and that's what we all do. I know I'm making an extreme version of that, but it's helpful just to see it, because that's what we do, particularly if people are sensitive. And what I mean by sensitive is not like, oh, it's a sensitive person, they're oversensitive, and you can't, taking everything personally. No, I mean being able to perceive what others are feeling as well. So empathize. So you can, what empathy is really making a copy of what somebody else is going through. It doesn't take it away from them, or you're being responsible for it. You're just making a copy so then you can connect with their state. But again, it's not your challenge, it's their challenge, and they have their specific challenge, because that's what's necessary for them to grow. So you can look at it and go, oh, I can solve that, that's fine, solved it, come on, just now you can move on. That's kind of missing the point. Do you see? So in so many ways, it's not about everybody else being okay around you. Actually, what you need to do is to work on your experience of you. In fact, being more sensitive is the ultimate excuse for not tuning in to the experience of you and creating your reality, and how and actualizing your potential of all that you can be, which in my perspective is spirituality. It is a deeper knowing of you as a feeling, as an experience and then actualizing that. And that's really what I'm most passionate about, is people embodying that, the person they want to become, stepping into that. That's what I get excited about.
Yeah, which you said something there that was really interesting, and well, all of it was, but you said some people, in order to get to that point of realizing kind of that deeper level, is things need to quieten down. And a lot of people find it difficult for that time, right? For it to quieten down, because they know something isn't quite right, but actually they still just carry on that I've got to go to work, I've got to sort this out, I've got to get that done. And the constant stress and the pressure, you literally are like a hamster. Is it on a hamster wheel or whatever you're on?
Yeah.
You're constant, you're not stopping to think. And sometimes 20 years goes by, and then all of a sudden you hit a wall, and then you're like, okay, I need to stop, which is like extreme examples, which but what advice would you give to people? Because I know there's a lot of stuff at the moment around, there are so many apps that are available as well, just to help people to just stop and think, or just stop, just turn your, brain, like, just stop it for a while. Is there anything that people could do? Because I know people listen to this podcast, and other people around me find it difficult to step out just for those 2 minutes, just to literally breathe and have a cup of tea. And that sounds crazy to me now. But before, it would have been no. It's like I now have to actually force myself to do it. But I know people find it very difficult, because they feel that if they stop, everything will break, or everything will stop, or they will not have fulfilled their purpose for the day, or what they believe their purpose is. So how would you get people to potentially stop and think, is the question, or just stop?
Well, there's lots of different ways to do that, and there's lots of different ways that work for different people. So there's no real caveats for that. But I would say that, and it is very challenging in the current conditions to do that. So it's important to recognize that, and then to be patient, and just to be patient with yourself, and to notice that it's just about really tuning in, and being honest with yourself. And that's the only way to take responsibility for what you're experiencing, and you can only do that with awareness. So it's just planning in, if you like, times to just stop, or just literally stop right now. Like, you can stop just even for a couple of seconds right now, and just notice what you're feeling. Like, what are you feeling deep inside of you? And just notice. And at first you're like, oh my goodness, well, I don't even know where to start with that. Well, maybe just start with noticing your breathing, and just notice, where do you feel your breathing? Often when we haven't checked in and just felt, how does it feel to be me? Or even asked that question, then our breathing is kind of vertical. It's kind of going up and down the top of your chest. So see if you can notice, if you can breathe down into your belly. Can you make your breathing a bit more horizontal? And just notice, how does it feel when you do that? And maybe notice the state of mind. How does it feel in your head? And you're just curious. You're not judging it. You're not going, oh, it's this and it's that. It's just notice it. And every time you just notice without applying a label to it, it actually allows things to quieten down a bit. And that's a very start. And there are lots of different specific processes that you can go through to find the best kind of process for you that gets you into a state where you can just experience being you, rather than it being a concept, an idea of who you are. And I kind of, one thing that I often do with my clients, and you'll probably recognize this as well, Amy, is to think about remember a time when you were a young child and you just felt awesome. Just remember a time where you felt completely free, you felt at peace, you felt happy, joyful. Just remember a time when you were in that state. And with remembering it, you are remembering it. You're putting it back together. You're creating it now in this moment. And often we don't do that. We don't create the states that we want to feel inside. But we can, and we do have the ability to do that in every single moment. So that's one very simple way to do that.
Thank you for sharing that. Obviously, I am already with you. So just to kind of put into a little bit more context, the reason for this episode and our conversation is because I have been approached by so many different people who have asked me how I have been able to get from where I was to where I'm at now. And just to say to everybody, Simon has been instrumental in that process. So everything we're talking about today is to get you to understand, well, some of the tips, some of the tricks that I'm using on a daily basis or that I've worked with Simon to get me to, well, here now, really. And it's been, it's been a journey, and it hasn't just been a journey for me. I know it's been a journey for Simon because,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm a special case and he's had to deal with that. I have another question for you. Right. How often are you checking in with yourself?
That is a really good question. And sometimes, and I think that I could do it a lot more. And sometimes, it's more a state of being. So I've just had 4 days where I went to Devon, and the place that we went to, I used to go as a child, and we went there many times. As soon as I go there, I feel like I'm on holiday. Like, it's instant. And it's so easy for me just to be. And so I don't have to check in that often because there are not many situations there that get me into my head where I'm just judging things from an outside perspective. No, I'm in my body, I'm present, I'm being, and I'm loving it. And that's sometimes, if you aren't in that state, that there's parts of your lifestyle where you have to be in your head sometimes, or you think you need to be, at least at this particular time. Then you need to have little tips and tricks and stuff to bring you back into that state. And those are the times where I go, oh, okay, I need to check in and just notice. So how often? Depends on the day. Sometimes it can be up to maybe 20 times a day, or it can be for a consistent period. I'm constantly doing that, and I'm constantly focusing on that, even when it's sometimes with a client, which seems a bit strange because you think, oh, all the focus is on them. But in fact, in order to be fully present for them, I have to be fully present in myself. So I have to be responsible for all of the things that come up for a client, and then I'm going, oh, that sounds similar to my experience. Oh. So I have to be aware of if it's something that's being triggered inside of me, and to be fully responsible for that. I have to be present there. I have to be in my body where those things that are triggered are coming up. So I am then in a constant state of checking on myself. I'd probably say that with almost every client. Constantly I'm there. So that helps me just to listen. So I know it's not about me, it's all about them every time that... does that make sense? It's not a typical just yes, so many times
Yes,
a day.
I do it 7
Yeah.
times a day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, that does make sense. So just on that note, to make sure that I don't run away with myself in my own head, I have actually set reminders in my phone. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but the reminders are there, not just for me, but I've actually put them on the family calendar because
Brilliant.
everyone then knows that's time for mum to go and, I don't know, lock herself in a cupboard or something. But yeah, and also I've put in there like what they're going to be expecting me doing, so they know that they can't really, the kids will know that they can't, at that point, don't bother asking mum if dinner's ready because she won't answer you. But yeah, so I've had to kind of take it to that extent. And I think obviously current circumstances with everyone being at home meant that I kind of had no choice but to do that.
Yes.
So that worked out quite well. One last question.
Mm-hmm.
What 3 things would you say to a younger Simon if you met him now?
Wow. So I would say, first of all, accept yourself. So just fully accept what is, because I definitely struggled with perfectionism as a coping mechanism to just being myself, and to a degree still now. So it would be a case of really a deep acceptance, really deeply accept who you are and life as it is. So I don't know if that's 1 or 2, if that counts as 1 or 2.
No, I'll let you have two.
Because that's a really important one, to accept life as it is. And then lastly, dare to dream and dare to actualize those dreams. Dare to really step into that and to step up and believe that you can create that and just start taking action towards it. Whatever anybody says, it doesn't matter. It's all about what you want and what you create. It's about your personal image of what is fulfilling, because you're the only person in the world that actually knows what is actually fulfilling for you. You're the only person that can explore that. And it's up to every single person in the world to discover that for themselves. And we can only help each other to do that. So I would say to him, go inside, go and explore, go and find out what is actually really fulfilling for you and act on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I don't know if you've had a chance to look at my email, but I'm looking at the time. How are you fixed for time?
I have a client at 4, but apart from
Yes.
that, I'm good.
Okay, cool. I don't know if you had a chance to look at Think Like a Monk.
Only briefly. Only had a look at the introduction, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, because on there's this Vedic personality test,
Yes, I saw
right?
briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Well, anyway, so I did that, and I wanted to see what your score would be. So when you get a chance, will you do that and let me know?
Yeah.
Cool, because I scored highly for guide, leader, and creator, but then I got one extra mark, and that takes me to being a maker. Now, like I said, in my head, I think that means I'm an all-rounder, but that's just me now, just blowing my trumpet because, I can and feel okay about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I think at some stage when you get a chance, I think it would be good to have a chat about all those different quizzes and tests in that book. Just to, just because I'm nosy, I want to know what your take is on everything.
Sure.
I actually have another question.
Yeah, go for it.
How much time do you spend reading and researching? Because, when you talk to your clients, they're probably constantly kind of telling you lots of different things. And how much do you spend kind of becoming the all-knowing, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, I used to read loads and loads and loads, and every time I went for a run, I used to do lots of running. I used to listen to audiobooks the whole time. So I've got, if you look on my Audible account, I've got hundreds of books on there that I've listened to, and I have listened to a lot less recently, probably the last year, because I found that there's this kind of overlapping trends that's at the center of all of them. And the best way for me to explore that and to really, it goes beyond a knowing now. It points to a deeper knowing of, okay, well, life, it really is the way it is, but you are an active part of it and you can create what you want. And at first it's like, oh my goodness, that's quite scary. But in fact, we really are. We all are. We're all a part of it. We are. And the next step is then taking action out of that. So there's a part where it's useful to have knowledge and perspectives. And for me, it was about also sharing as many perspectives to help as many people, guide them through and giving them lots of different options. So I wanted to have lots of different resources for that. But I actually have, as I said, read a lot less over the last year because I feel it's more, the most important part is to actualize it, to take action in your own life, to move towards that you want to create. So you can get all the examples, all the inspiration from outside, but you do need to discover it within you. And you need to spend time on your own, within your own experience of you to do that. So you need that incubation time without books, without other people whispering in your ear as well. And that's what's most useful at this stage of my life at the moment. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Yeah, I totally get what you mean about the themes in the books just generally kind of overlapping. That's definitely something I've noticed too. But cool. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, not just that it's been great having a chat as always, and I also would say that it's very inspiring how much you share, how much you're willing to share. And I know that the place you're sharing it from, of how much you care and how much you want people to be able to use your perspectives and your experiences and challenges that you've had in your life, so that they can maybe shortcut some of their own and come to a place that you've recently discovered, which from what I've heard from our sessions, you're so much happier being in. And it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be a part of that journey to you discovering who you really are. And I think the world is going to benefit enormously from you doing that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Eternal Paradigm. Join me next time.